Around the 1940s on, Frank Sinatra was everything. Beautiful singer, Academy Award-winning actor, biggest star in the world. Every woman wanted a piece of him, but so did the FBI. So like I've said a million times on this channel, I adore Frank Sinatra. I listen to him almost daily. This is not meant to be disparaging in any way, shape, or form. I would never. And I'm gonna be so honest with you, I'm mainly making this video for selfish reasons because I just want to talk to him, but this story really is fascinating. Apparently, allegedly, there is some evidence of Frank being involved in the mob, so we're gonna go through everything. And without further rambling, this is the tale of Frank Sinatra's ties to the mafia. Okay, I have no idea what I'm doing makeup-wise today, so we're just gonna wing it. So Francis Albert Sinatra was born in Hoboken, New Jersey on December 12, 1915 to two Italian immigrants. His father was a bar owner and a boxer, and his mother was a midwife, and it was rumored that she provided illegal abortion services in the area. How would you? I don't know, but I digress. Now, as a teenager, Frank was inspired by Bing Crosby, and that's when he decided he wanted to be a singer. He wanted to make more of his life, who wouldn't, and he clung to his singing talent and his beautiful, warm baritone voice as his ticket out. So he joined this little local singing group called the Hoboken Four, and in 1935, they won a talent competition together and then went on to tour around the country. But Frank just always wanted more, and not like in any sort of negative way, he just wanted to make the most of what he was given. And he was the only one of the four who was actually really serious about making music his livelihood, so they disbanded. So for the next few years, Frank sang in clubs with local bands and sang for radio broadcasts. Now, I didn't really know where to put this in the story, so I'm just gonna like shoehorn it in right here. If you have ever wondered about that iconic mugshot, let me tell you the story. So he was arrested for seduction. Yes, really. Apparently it was a crime back then to sleep with a woman by telling her that you would marry her, and that's what he did. But then it came out that she was already married. Yeah, scandalous, salacious. So everything was dropped and that was that. Has my hair been sticking out crazy this entire time? Probably. It's been one of those days. Anyway, in 1939, so he's 24 years old, Frank gets discovered. So he was singing and also waiting tables at a place called the Rustic Cabin in New Jersey, and this guy named Harry James walked in, heard this golden-throated angel singing. Now, Harry had just left the Benny Goodman Orchestra to start his own band, and he knew that he was looking at his newest member. Frank did work with him briefly for only about 7-ish months, and apparently Harry wanted to change Frank's name to Frankie Satin. And Frank was like, nah. Thank God. That's criminal. That's the most criminal thing in this video. Spoiler alert. But most importantly, they made about 10 songs together, which really grew Frank's reputation among industry musicians. So in December 1939, Frank is approached with a more legit, more lucrative offer from bandleader Tommy Dorsey, and Harry graciously lets Frank go from his contract with him. He's like, this is obviously a big opportunity for you, go get it. So now Frank is under contract with the Tommy Dorsey Band, and they made a whopping 83 songs from 1940 to 1942. I actually don't know if that's a lot. I've never done songs before. But listen, this new lucrative contract was honestly extortionate and very one-sided. It stipulated that Tommy would receive 43% of Frank's lifetime earnings, including solo projects. And by 1942, Frank's fame was skyrocketing. He wanted to get out of this god-awful contract and go solo. But of course, Tommy was not having it, and they were in negotiations for months until Frank got tired of it and sent a friend of his to pay Tommy a visit and ask him to reconsider. And this friend was apparently none other than Willie Moretti, underboss of the Genovese crime family. So it turns out that all of these clubs and casinos that Frank has been performing in are run by the mafia. So needless to say, Frank got out of his contract in late 1942, and only weeks later he was already an icon. Every man wanted to be him. Women fainted at his feet. Pre-SAG, I would give anything. I would give an arm. I would give a kidney. I would give both kidneys to go back in time and see Frank Sinatra perform. Anyway, his solo career with Columbia Records began in late 1944, and his success grew until about 1947-48. His popularity plummeted. He was this very handsome blue-eyed man with the voice of an angel, and yet somehow his career was stalling, because around this time reports started coming out about Frank's association with organized crime. Newspapers were running articles detailing his friendships with notorious people like the Fischetti brothers and Lucky Luciano, who we talked about last week. But Frank's connections with the mob started long before. So we know that he came up playing in mob-owned clubs and casinos. It was even rumored that Willie Moretti was Frank's godfather. But when he started rising to fame, he first attracted the attention of the FBI when they claimed he paid a doctor $40,000 to declare him medically unfit for World War II service. So they're saying he dodged the draft, basically. The reason was psychological issues as well as a punctured eardrum, which did end up being legit, so all of the allegations were dropped. But the FBI were not going to just leave him alone. No, they tracked Frank Sinatra's every move for 40 years. The Havana Conference of 1946 in Havana, Cuba was this historic meeting between the US Mafia and Cosa Nostra leaders. They needed to discuss some roles, lay some boundaries, and talk about business interests. And it's rumored, according to many historians and law enforcement, that Frank Sinatra carried $2 million there to be delivered to Lucky Luciano. However, again, the FBI were watching his every move at this point, and suspicions of him doing anything like this were not found in any of the documents. So who knows on that one. Now, there's another story that is kind of confusing, to be honest, that in 1950 he was going to snitch on the mob and turn informant to try and protect himself. But there is some back and forth with this one. It is mostly reported as that, but others say that he just had information on an incident that was not against the mob. But the FBI declined to even meet with him, so we'll never know for sure. But honestly, snitching on the mob to protect yourself? Like, is it just me, or does that make zero sense? Over the next few tumultuous years, Frank declined both professionally and personally. His drop in relevance, which sounds insane to say about Frank Sinatra, resulted in a deep depression, and in 1952, it seemed like he had lost it all. He had just gone through a divorce, his recording contract with Columbia was not renewed, his TV show was canceled, and he was dropped by his talent agency. He felt like it was over. And that's when he started pleading with Harry Cohn, the president of Columbia Pictures, for a role in an upcoming movie. So he wanted a role in From Here to Eternity. He even said he'd work for minimum salary. And Harry said no, he still was not having it. Until allegedly he was persuaded to reconsider, we'll put it that way, by Johnny Roselli, a Chicago outfit mobster who worked for Al Capone. So guess who got the role? Frank Sinatra was back, apparently partially thanks to his mafia ties. And it was actually acting rather than singing that put him back in the spotlight. He went on to be one of the top film stars of the 50s and 60s. His performance in From Here to Eternity even landed him an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. In 1953, Frank signed with Capitol Records and over the next 9 years released arguably his best singing work. In 1957, he became leader of the Rat Pack, and they took up residency in Las Vegas, performing in casinos and even appearing in movies together. And as you'd imagine, the mob essentially owned Vegas. So around this time, controversy swirled around Frank once again for his connections to organized crime. And he was friends with several high-ranking mobsters like Sam Giancana, boss of the Chicago outfit. He was one of the successors of Al Capone. Lucky Luciano, who was allegedly searched once and had Frank's home address written on a piece of paper in his pocket, which is so random. and Carlo Gambino, boss of the Gambino crime family. And really, back then, the mafia were insanely powerful. They could make or break your entire career. Now, apparently at one point, Frank's daughter was pursuing Elvis, Elvis Presley, even though Priscilla was already with him, which is kind of messy. And he wrote a letter to his secret spiritual advisor. Why secret? I don't know. But Elvis said he thought she was dangerous and he was afraid of making enemies, especially ones in the mafia. Talking about Frank Sinatra, her dad. And listen, he was apparently planning on telling her he was gay so she would leave him alone. That's his side of the story anyway. So in 1960, Frank was helping John F. Kennedy, JFK, with his presidential run. He worked the phones, he did fundraising for the campaign, and he got support from the mob, mainly Sam Giancana and the Chicago outfit. So the mob controlled the unions, and the union members usually voted as a block, like they all voted together. And in exchange, Frank would play at Sam Giancana's nightclub. They did him a favor and he repaid it. So JFK won the presidency, obviously, and the CIA allegedly reached out to the mob to help them in a plot to assassinate Fidel Castro, aka the communist prime minister of Cuba. So then Frank introduced JFK to Sam Giancana's girlfriend, Judith Campbell Exner. And in the years that followed, she was a connection between JFK and the mob helping in this plot. But the assassination part never happened. Apparently they kept trying to poison him, which didn't work, so they just canceled it to do the Bay of Pigs invasion instead, which failed. Now, when you are a megastar like Frank Sinatra, there is always a dark side that comes with the fame. He became a target for unstable people to extort, blackmail, threaten, everything. So in 1963, 3 men kidnapped his son, Frank Sinatra Jr., to try and get money from Frank. Like, they tried to ransom him. And the kidnappers demanded that all communication be over payphones, so Frank started carrying 10 dimes in his pocket at all times. And later on, by the way, when he did pass away, he was buried with 10 dimes in his pocket, which is kind of sad. Anyway, Sam Giancana told Frank to go to the FBI, but apparently said, hey, if they don't get your son back, the Chicago outfit will. And it would not be pretty if they had to do it. But the FBI did catch the guys and all 3 were convicted. Now, call it shady all you want, but there were times when Frank would use his connections, and his celebrity for that matter, for good. Frank Sinatra was actively and loudly anti-racist. Sammy Davis Jr. was a good friend of Frank's and a member of the Rat Pack. Now, we have to remember all of this is during segregation, so there were a lot of places where Sammy was not even allowed to go into. And Frank would say, okay, if he's not allowed in there, then neither am I. He wouldn't perform in those places. He wouldn't even step foot in them. There was even one instance where he went to a theater and ripped up his contract in front of them because they didn't let black people inside. He was an early and avid supporter of the civil rights movement. He performed at benefit shows and he donated a lot of money to the cause. But at the same time, civil rights workers were being threatened, and worse, like way worse, by, listen, I don't know if I can say it on YouTube or not, but the guys in like the white robes and the pointy hoods, you know what I mean. Now, according to legend, Frank sent word to his mob friends to start putting some pressure on those guys. So some of the white robe people's leaders were taken for a ride by the mob, locked up for a few days, and given a stern talking to. Now again, is that a true story? We don't know. I just thought I would throw it in here just in case. What we do know is that Frank Sinatra advocated for desegregation to the point that his Rat Pack would not play any venue that was still segregated, which integrated Las Vegas real quick. Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack ruled Vegas at the time, so if they shunned you, good luck. Frank was publicly, openly confrontational towards racism and blacklisting during the Red Scare, aka denying people opportunities based on their perceived political affiliations. Which begs the question, were the FBI worried about his mafia connections, or did they perceive him as a threat? He had a massive amount of influence and was so outspoken about social issues, and maybe they didn't like that. Yes, his FBI files revealed plenty of public photos and friendships with known mobsters. They did each other favors, and the mob treated him well, so what was he supposed to do, show him his back? That seems like a not smart thing to do to the mafia anyway. His defense was always that if you play places, you're gonna know the guys who run them, and seeing as how the mafia ran almost all of them, I think it's a fair point. He quite literally could not have performed without meeting them. And I think the mob gravitated towards him because of their shared Italian ancestry. They enjoyed seeing an Italian-American man succeed. And I also believe that's really as far as it went. The mafia knew they were best off to keep Frank at arm's length, to not get him directly involved. But every now and then, they may help each other out, and they never snubbed each other. Frank's mob association, to me at least, just seems like the result of his time, circumstances, and location. And though there is zero concrete evidence that Frank Sinatra was ever in the mob, his story sits in a fascinating place between fame and the underworld and adds a complex filter to his image as an American icon. And for every crazy mob story in his FBI file, there's bound to be one of him speaking up against racism and for the sake of democracy. And that is all I have for today. Thank you for coming over. I'm so glad we finally got to talk about Frank Sinatra. Anyway, if you have any story ideas, please feel free to comment them so I can see what you want to see. And with that, I will see you next week. Toodaloo!